My name is JP Sherman, and I work at RedHat. My job is basically this. I connect people to the information that they're looking for in a completely agnostic way, whether it's SEO, voice, chat, or any other method that people are looking for information. So I don't just do SEO, I do findability. So, I'm gonna be a little existential here. Who am I? I started my career in search while working for a US Army PsyOp. It's not that scary. A lot of what I did was humanitarian demining and malaria prevention in Southeast Asia. So it's disseminating information. I studied biology and anthropology with a focus in behavioral science. I've worked for large agencies and small agencies. I've been in-house. And I started getting into on-site search when I was recruited to build a search engine for video games. It failed. Now I run search and findability for RedHat. So we're going to start with the fact that what is the behavior behind search as in general? It's a journey. And the idea is that a person is looking for something that they don't know or something that they need and that they want. So it ultimately starts with desire. So I'm going to reach out and say, how many of you right now use data to measure, analyze your SEO and your PPC? Should be everybody. All right, how many people of you actually look at your on-site search data on a fairly regular basis? That's great, but it's still not enough. I kind of see on-site search as the little sibling of SEO because it's useful, but not a lot of people are talking about it or even using the information that it can provide to make better decisions. All right, throughout this, I'm going to do some shameless Twitter plug moments. The reason that on-site search is so important is that if a user is using your site search, they're engaged, they think you have something they want, and they are expressing that intention by actually using your on-site search. They've demonstrated a basic level of trust in the sense that they're not ditching, they are continuing their journey. And they're in an actively looking phase. When it comes to behavior, post-search behavior of users, they're more likely to return, they're more likely to add to the cart, they're more likely to consume your content, and they're more likely to convert. Users who don't find what they're looking for, they know that Google is sometimes less than a click away. And in a lot of things, they remember the miss more than they remember the hit. And they're less likely to browse your site. So I'm using a little bit of fear tactics on you guys right now. So across the industry, about approximately 30% of visitors use on-site search. And this is a really, really fantastic scenario because this means that people actually want to, when they enter your site, they may have come in through a link from a social network, a friend, even Google. And if they want to continue their engagement with your site, they can either use the navigation, they can use internal links, or they can search. And this is the big number. Research shows, and I do need to be clear, that there has not been a lot of research on this, so this data is about 2 years old. It may be better, may be worse, but honestly, because nobody's doing a lot of research on this, it might be out of date. But still, it's fairly significant. We do know that people who search the site, these are people who are 5 to 6 times more likely to convert. Only about 15% of companies have resources dedicated. And this is the really kind of foundational aspects of search behavior. So my background is in behavioral science and biology. So I look at the active, the passive, and the quantitative and the qualitative behaviors that people do that we can measure in on-site search. So there are two basic types of search. There's active search and there's passive search. Passive search is very similar to if you're driving, you're on the road, you are lightly scanning for any threats, any cars moving in either erratic ways. When it comes to Google or your own on-site search, people have switched from a passive mode to an active mode. This means that they're actively looking for something. They may not even know what they're looking for, but they'll know it when they see it. So this starts with desire. They want something. This desire expresses itself as a query. And the tricky part is that that query puts inside the user's head acceptance and rejection criteria. So if you're considering about the 10 blue links on Google, I am processing acceptance and rejection criteria for every result that I see that I'm scanning in less than a second to say, yes, this could potentially be useful, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for, or no, this doesn't look right. And this is why it's so critical. Because people look on the search engine results snippets for less than a second, on average, the imperative part for SEOs and people who are working on on-site search is to create an immediate perception of value. This is done through title tags and metadata, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, I got way ahead of myself. Apparently, I'm very excited about this. So, we're talking about the immediate perception of value in your content. This can be expressed through title tags, meta tags, even microdata structured markup. So, if it's even in image search, there are ways to convey to the user what this is about and the perception of value. So now we're going to talk a little bit about measuring. So now we have the foundation. We know why on-site search is important, and we know the kind of background behaviors that humans use when they're searching. How do we measure this? So, search behavior is the context for measurement. And what do I mean by measurement? It basically falls into 3 categories. What are the words people are using? What are the behaviors they elicit or exhibit when they accept a query or the results? And what do they do when they reject it? So the critical thing is identify the things that trigger the acceptance. This could be well-crafted titles. Quick aside, one of the experiments that I ran when I was working at a large international online bike retailer was my competition was Target, Walmart in the US, REI, so really big names, even Amazon. And every single one of them had the title tag, road bikes, pipe, brand. Our site had road bikes, pipe, brand. I thought this is crap. So I went in without permission and changed it to lightweight and fast bikes for the open road. We went from position 7 to position 1 in 3 weeks. Because when we're talking about the perception of value, I tried to optimize for emotion and optimized for the click-through as opposed to optimizing for that one perfect word that everyone else is using. Identify the conditions that result in a failure state. What's a failure state? Not a click. Even a search with no results. A long time ago, there's a company called ThinkGeek, and for their April Fool's joke, they mocked up a Tauntaun sleeping bag. My friend who worked there said that they went from 0 instances of Tauntaun sleeping bag in their on-site site to thousands of it. And every single time it was, nothing comes up with this information. So thousands of people were searching that site for something that they thought was really cool and could potentially exist and getting no feedback. Well, we all know what nerds do when they get mad. So at this point, the searcher accepts or rejects the criteria. This behavior is based on the internal criteria influenced by the results of that search. And this is great until you start actually collecting the data. And this is me on a regular basis. I have more failures than successes when it comes to this. When we talk about data, we talk about the cast of the characters. These are clicks, these are impressions, these are instances, these are searches with no results. how we turn that data into something into a story is ultimately more useful when it comes to measuring. So let's start with the keywords. And again, I kind of expressed this earlier, but like, don't think of keywords as just a bag of words. Consider keywords as the vehicles through which intention is expressed. When you're looking at on-site search, what keywords drive the most engagement? What are your KPIs? Is it conversions? Is it engagements? Is it shares? Is it comments? Is it some sort of user-generated content? At RedHat, we don't actually sell anything. Like I said, we sell free software. So all of our content, none of it has a conversion attached to it. So we look at consumption. Are people actually using that content in a predictable way? What are your top converting keywords in content? When you start looking at this piece of content drives a high conversion rate through on-site search, you can improve that content, you can make it more prominent, you can display that, you could use that information to create features and promotions and things like that, because you know now that this content converts well. So for users who have, another shameless Twitter moment, this is a fun thing that we did when I was in e-commerce. We took the keyword that the other user searched for on our on-site search, dropped a cookie, and used that information for retargeting. That way, as they searched the web, if they were looking for Tauntaun sleeping bags, they'd encounter our ads as they continued on through their internet journeys. So, let's talk about different types of keywords. They're high frequency, low intent. Low frequency, high intent. There are long tails, and then there are unicorns. Unicorns are basically defined as a keyword that shows up once in a given period of time. And these can be, I'd say about 80% of them are typos. But at the same time, when you can start looking through these unicorns, you can find some really good stuff. So when it relates to these, when we start looking at quantitative metrics associated with these things, we want to look at how many clicks, what was the click-through rate, how many conversions, what was the conversion rate, what was the consumption rate, and the negative CTR obviously is 1 minus the click-through rate, but I like to use the negative the negative CTR as a way to look at my search failures. It's a way to kind of recontextualize the information that I'm sharing. Say, we had a 45% click-through rate. Is that good? Well, we had a 55% negative click-through rate, so we still have lots of room to improve. So when we're talking about high frequency and low intent keywords, these are things like bikes, software, college, Finland. This is the top of the funnel. This is people searching for information. These are people rarely looking to actually purchase anything. They're looking for information or knowledge. When we're looking at the middle of the funnel, download latest iTunes, stream The Clash, what does colorophobia mean? When it comes to this type of thing, the action is, the user wants to take an action. They want to understand a specific thing. This is the difference between high intent, low frequency, and low intent, high frequency. So while click-through rates are really good to understand kind of the overall health of the click-through rate, it's very much like taking the temperature. It's not going to tell you anything specific. It's going to tell you, is it doing okay? Yeah or no. Just a fun fact, when people right-click on a search result and open a new tab, sometimes you'll get weird things like a greater than 100% click-through rate. Google Analytics hasn't quite figured this out perfectly yet, so that doesn't mean you're amazing. It just means that this is a behavior that people are doing. So when you start seeing patterns of keywords getting a higher than 100% click-through rate, you can actually identify a very specific behavior that a user is doing. And if you can actually use that behavior to increase your engagement, that's fantastic. All right. People ask me, what is a good click-through rate for on-site search? I've done some research in knowledge base. I've done some research in e-commerce. And generally what I find is that People have a high expectation of search. It is just supposed to work. Thanks, Google. They don't tolerate bad results. And if your search results are bad, then you are bad and you should feel bad. And so what I found is, on average, if you have less than a 75% click-through rate, people notice. They don't like it. They think you suck, and they know Google is a click away. But if you're above 75%, you are a magical wizard. They don't understand what you do. There's very little gray room in this. This is one of those rare things where it is almost binary. So, when we talk about conversions, it is quantifiable. It is an action taken, it is a click, it is a purchase. When I talk about consumptions, this is something that gets a little trickier, and people are still trying to kind of figure out in a consistent and predictable way. Because not all content is consistent across the web, there's news, videos, articles, documentation, technical documentation, troubleshooting documents. You really can't say that there is one type of consumption that's going to fit them all. But generally it boils down to scroll plus time. Did a user scroll? How much time did they spend on the page based upon an average read speed of the content that's on the page? When you squish those two things together, you get a good idea of how your content is being consumed. I generally avoid looking at data that's about 2 standard deviations from the mean, mainly because these are your edge cases, and what you want to do with the consumption data is understand how people are using your content, not how many people are consuming your content. And that's really kind of the key differentiator. When we talk about consumption, it is 40% likely that this person read this article, not this person read 40% of the article. So we're talking about a little bit of nuanced way of describing what consumption is and how it's measured. So again, I always go back to failure because it's something that I'm really good at. Understand that SEOs really tend to look for the top position. And almost habitually, we forget that there are 9 other pieces of information on that page, on Google, on your search, most likely on your results, because 10 seems like a magical number that people really like. So, we talk about how things fail. There are several different ways to actually provide assistance to the user when performing an on-site search. It can be as simple as, did you mean? It can be an auto-suggest, such as when you're typing, a drop-down drops down to either specific pieces of content in your library or similar keywords that people have searched for. And what happens is that when you give a user a way to actually help them search along, they do better. And this is simple Amazon. Did you find what you're looking for? The trick with that is that you generally get such low user engagement that it's not always statistically significant. The last piece of research that I did, that in 15,000 content consumptions, the search feedback on our page was filled out 4 times. The other funny thing is that if my page is about apple pies, and I get a person coming in from looking for apple pies, yes, this was helpful. If I get a user coming to that same page from apple pie recipes, no. Apple pie gallery, nope, not helpful. So now you have the same piece of content with this was helpful, this was not helpful. So understand that when we're talking about helpful search, it's really only valuable in the context of the keyword given. It's a really long-winded way of saying, it's kind of useful. So these are some auto-suggest. This is very common. This drives engagement. This drives a better search experience for the user. If they don't know exactly what they're looking for, they can find it quickly and easily. They don't have to type as much. And one of the things that we look at is the time it takes for a user from query to conversion. If you can make their experience faster to get them to the point where they interact with your site, they are happier. So, some sort of language recognition. When I search for telescope fishing, Amazon knows I'm looking probably for a telescopic fishing rod. So having some language logic in your search can actually assist users in this. So having some sort of auto-suggest can increase your click-through rate and conversion. So when we have no kind of assistance, we get about a 42% click-through rate and a 3.9 conversion rate. With it, you're looking at about a good 10 to 20% increase in those core KPIs. For queries that have 0 or anemic results, this is one of the really cool things that you can do. If it's valuable to you, send that to your content team to create a content pipeline. When people ask, what should I write about? I don't have anything to write about. Look through your search queries and understand, we get this query 10 times, but nobody clicks. Or we get this query 20 times, and we don't get any results. This is perfect information to send to your content team. Now, contextualization and disambiguation. Every single one of these images is associated with the word halo. So it can get a little tricky. Fortunately, most of the time, if you're in a niche and somebody is, if I'm on a video game site and I type in halo, probably mean that. But if I'm on Amazon, which sells music, games, toys, well, not that, but it's critical to understand what are the keywords in your universe that need to be contextualized. One of the things that we've done at RedHat is we've created a knowledge graph. So one of our products is called JBoss. It's a middleware application. And what we've done is added this knowledge graph that is, at this point, manually curated by me to show users more information about what they're looking for. And again, JBoss, I don't know, I can't tell if this person is looking to download something. I can't tell if they're looking to fix a problem. I can't see if they're looking for installation or registration issues. So based on my keyword data, I can see that when it comes to JBoss, downloads are important, information are important, documentation is important. So I base this knowledge graph on the top searches surrounding the low frequency, high intent keywords from that low intensity, high volume keyword. And again, 10 blue links may not even work for your particular business. And this is the thing, don't be Google. Please don't be Google. You can actually be better than Google because you know your product, you know your audience, you know a lot more about the nuances of what your people do and what your products are. So, and the other great thing is that you're also working with a smaller set of information, so you can be much more specific. If images are important, you can organize your search results like this. Blended search results are really fantastic, specifically in the area of high feature products. And these are just some other examples of how search engines create a user interface that supports their users' needs. And I want to repeat that UI UX is absolutely critical in this stage. You want to be able to test this, you want to be able to change your layouts and be able to measure how these things happen, what the changes that you made had any effect on your core KPIs. So, does the experimental group have a higher click-through rate? Are there more purchases or conversions? Does more content get viewed after a search is performed? These are all things that you can start looking at to figure out what's important to me and how can I design an experiment with a control group in an A/B setting to test exactly for what you want. What is the answer that you want from a specific question that you have? Oh yeah, mobile's super important too. And that's just the thing. I'll tell you a quick story. We made some changes on our search page, and we found that on desktop, we got an increase of 4% click-through rate. Yay! We went to the mobile section, and we had a 7% drop in click-through rate. And part of it was because of the way that the fonts rendered. So we started creating more if-and statements about specifically around fonts, about snippet separators, little things like that. We were able to get the mobile click-through rate back up. But as you do these tests, always remember that people are searching on desktop and people are searching on mobile. And the chance that people are going to be searching on mobile is going to increase over time to the point that the mobile experience is going to be a more important experience for the user, even if they're the same result. Even if you get the exact same results, the mobile UI and UX is going to be absolutely critical, if it isn't already. So, when you start, and this is a fun thing that I like to do. When I measure the queries that get no clicks, I take those queries and I search Google. Do we show up in Google? Because if we don't, we just lost twice. I take a look at the competition and see why are they ranking for these particular terms? What content do they have that is more relevant in the user's eyes? So I like to use the metaphor of resolution. And this is the really important thing. Start at 8-bit resolution. Start with Pong. Understand that you just need to start looking at the data. You need to start understanding the click-through rate. Understand that the click-through rate is not the best indication of how well your search is doing. Hyper-localize your internal search. And I'll use a really quick example for that. When I worked at the bike retailer, for the same keyword, bike tires, we would get a horrible click-through rate because it was just the results were bad. So I did some testing, and I found that in Los Angeles, for people looking for bike tires, they were most likely looking for road bike tires. In Colorado Springs, where the Rocky Mountains are, people looking for bike tires were likely looking for mountain bike tires. So one of the things that we did was we started biasing search results by geo. So when a person in Colorado Springs looked for bike tires, mountain bike tires results were biased. We started doing more personalization. We found that the types of people who were looking for specific types of jerseys fit into specific groups, and we were able to use that kind of information to bias search results. You don't have to be pure as Google. You can use this information, use this kind of personalization to make your search results even better. Now, 16-bit. Measure the time from query to conversion. Create conversion events for content. Test, and this is when you start testing the UI changes. What do I mean by create conversion events in the content? When a user comes to a page, there can be a non-transactional conversion event, kind of like a micro conversion. Look for ways to send signals to your analytics that a user performed a beneficial action. Now, we're getting into 64-bit. Search-oriented microdata in content. Using structured markup and schema, start using that. Use that as a relevancy tuner for your search engine. Personalization of other data, and integrate search data in CMS so that your writers, when they look at a piece of content, they know that these are the 10 keywords that drive content to this page. Here's the user behavior from these content. This is the level of conversions that you get from this content. Integrate the data that you get from search into the writer's experience and the SEO's experience so they can clearly see the value of what they're doing. All right. The barriers really are minimal. Start with the data that you already collect. Refine that data with greater accuracy. Contextualize it with the KPIs that are important to you. And then turn that data into intelligence that can be connected, integrated, and shared. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Generally, most e-commerce come with a search app installed. there are other options. I use Apache Solr. There's SwiftType. There's Amazon Cloud Search. LucidWorks just came out with a really good plug-and-play cloud search where you basically paste the code into a page, run search from a cloud. So there are a lot of ways that you can actually get a better search than just the basic. Because most people, when they do build their site, they turn on search and then it's plug and play, and then they rarely look at it again. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm humbled and honored to be able to speak in front of you.